I cried multiple times, and that is, I am not saying this lightly, books don't really make me cry. I'm not a crier, and this book really wrecks me. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Kayomi JM, and I will be sharing with you all the books that I read in January. For the month of January, I read 10 books. 4 of those were audiobooks. 1 of those was a Kindle book, and the other 5 were physical books. So honestly, let's just get right into it. I have a hot cup of spicy chai. Get cozy and let's just delve into these books. So I'm going to discuss the books in the order I read them in. The first book was The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. It's a romance novel that followed a groomsman and his last minute guest, and they are basically doing a fake date. I gave this book 2 stars. I just didn't feel invested in their love story. I didn't feel like this was a story worth telling. I despise Drew, the main love interest. I thought he was terrible. And I don't dislike books because the main characters are terrible. I just thought that I couldn't understand Alexa's attraction to him with his behavior. He was deeply insecure and jealous. I felt like their story of love was underdeveloped. I felt like Drew wasn't nice to anyone besides his patients, which is I guess fine, but also, come on. So I did not enjoy it at all. I will not be reading the other books in the series. And then the other book I listened to was Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. I don't know. I can't recommend this book to anyone, but I do not think it was a bad book. I was quite entertained while still being very deeply depressed. I don't know. Basically, it's following Rachel, who's 24. She is Jewish, and she is also suffering from an eating disorder and lots of a lot of calorie counting and food rituals, and she starts dating a fat woman who works at her yogurt shop and is an Orthodox Jew. It's really hard to describe what goes on in this novel. It's really uncomfortable, it's really gross, it's really nasty, but somehow it works. But I did not give this one a rating because I just don't really know how I feel about it, and I don't think I can recommend it to anyone. The next book I read was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. It was super quick. I read it in one go. I thought I would like it more than I did because it was so highly recommended. I gave this 3 stars. Basically, it follows a woman, Kiko, who works in a convenience store in Japan. She is unusual, she is quirky, and she's someone who never really fits in, but she takes a lot of pride in her job at the convenience store, and she has no desire to really get another job, to get married, to have kids. But everyone around her and everyone in society thinks she's so unusual for not wanting more for herself, and it just kind of explores this dilemma that she has. I thought it was an enjoyable, entertaining read. I thought it was kind of funny and witty. At the same time, I felt like so much of this book made me think, is Kiko on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum? Because a lot of things she was saying wasn't really that outrageous to me personally, but a lot of her actions and her thoughts and her speech made me wonder if she was supposed to be autistic, or if I'm just reading that as another neurodivergent person. Am I just projecting onto her? So that was my take on it. I feel like it didn't really say much. People were saying that it says so much about society, but I felt like it didn't say anything new. So I wasn't that captivated by Convenience Store Woman, but when I give something 3 stars, it just means that I liked it. It was enjoyable, but nothing to, shout about. Okay. That I read, I listened to this on audiobook, was Death in Her Hands by Otessa Moshfegh. I gave this book 4 stars. I really liked it. I thought it was absolutely mad. I thought it was absolutely boring, but in a good way. It was so boring, but so much happened at the same time. I was really worried about the mixed reviews of this book, especially on Goodreads. A lot of people did not like it. I thought it was a brilliant character study. So this novel is basically about an elderly widow who's walking in the woods and she finds this cryptic note that makes her question everything about her new home. The note said her name was Magda, nobody will know who killed her. And then the narrator, whose life we are following, goes on this entire witch hunt to find out who killed Magda. And it's just written in this like stream of consciousness, like we are in her head, and it becomes much more than finding Magda's killer. She becomes obsessed with investigating who kills Magda, but we are taken back into her past. We're taken into exploring her relationship with her husband. She makes up an entire persona for who might have killed Magda. She makes up a life for Magda, a family for Magda. It's really scary. We're witnessing a woman on the edge of like going mad. And I quite liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was great. It made me want to read every single thing that Moshfegh has ever written. So yeah, pretty good book. The next book that I read was Against the Loveless World by Susan Abu Hawa. This was a 5-star read for me and my first 5-star read for the year. I absolutely fell in love with this book. I cried, I stayed up till 2 a.m. I carried these characters with me. I give it 5 stars. So Against the Loveless World by Susan Abu Hawa follows Nar, who is telling her story of her life from an Israeli confinement cell, solitary confinement cell, and we follow her life as a young woman who moves many different countries in the Middle East. We learn about struggling with displacement, abandonment, what it means to experience sexual exploitation, and then we follow Nar into her visit back home to Palestine and how that visit shaped her radicalization. It really made me feel like it was a real story. I felt like I was reading someone's memoir. I felt every pain that she felt. I cried multiple times, and that is, I am not saying this lightly, books don't really make me cry. I'm not a crier, and this book really wrecked me, and I felt like I couldn't read another book for days because this is all I was thinking about. I do not recommend this book lightly. It is filled with traumatic events. It is filled with sexual exploitation. It is filled with colonization. And if you experience any of those, I will say, if you are going to read this book, take care of yourself. I think this is going to be one of my favorite books of 2022 and possibly of my life. Like, it was that good and I really love it, and if you're in a good headspace to read this, I believe that you should. Okay, back to my phone. The next book I listened to on audiobook was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. I did not rate this. I do not feel comfortable usually rating memoirs, but I listened to this and I never read a Joan Didion book before, but I was prompted to soon after her passing, rest in peace. It's a nonfiction piece that details grief, especially after the death of both her daughter and her husband. And the way that Joan Didion talks about grief is just so real. It really made me feel things. And that sounds so lame, like, it made me feel things, but I've just never read anyone talk about grief in that way, and I think that if you've experienced grief in your life, it will impact you in a very specific way. I know a lot of people who've read this and said they didn't really feel connection to it because they haven't really experienced grief of a close loved one, and it really hits your heart. It really I can't even talk about this, but it really was sad, but so profound. The next book that I read in January was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. It is a Reese's Book Club pick. Every single person on Instagram and Twitter and BookTube and Book Talk has talked about 7 Days in June since the summer. So I decided that I was going to pick up 7 Days in June. And I thought that I would absolutely adore it. And I did not. 7 Days in June follows these two people who, when they were teenagers, they had a mad, wild, crazy week where they fell in love and did drugs, and then something happened. And now, 15 years later, we see that they are now both successful authors who rekindle at a Brooklyn Museum event. and they spend a week rekindling their love in the summer in Brooklyn. It is a romance. It does have disability rep, as the main character suffers from migraines. So I really enjoyed that representation. I thought it was really well done. It was really refreshing to see that, especially in a romance novel. It is a very black book, very Brooklyn book, and you know, I am black, I live in Brooklyn. That's why I read this book. I gave it 3 stars, and really and truly where this book fell short for me was I just didn't buy the romance of these teenagers who just knew each other for like a week and spent time on drugs the whole time. I just didn't really buy the romance of that. I also didn't love the overall use of black expressions and black Twitter talk and everything. Like, it's a black book, but I just don't feel like I need that pushed at me in every dialogue. It just felt like a snippet of Twitter, and it's a heavy-handed blackness. I just think that sometimes, especially millennial writers, can be really heavy-handed with that kind of imagery. That said, it was very entertaining. I know a lot of people loved it. So, okay, the next book I read was a book of short stories by Jhumpa Lahiri, the interpreter of Maladies. This was a reread for me. I did read this when I was in college. I loved it. This is a collection of short stories that kind of talk about immigration, families, and what it means to be a citizen and what it means to be of a place. I really enjoyed this as usual. I liked it the first time. I liked it again. I really loved the story when Mr. Prizada came to dine. I also loved The Third and Final Continent. I think that Jhumpa Lahiri's writing, as I have said many times to my friends, is just so powerful and so poetic, and the way she's able to talk about these really deep issues that affects the South Asian diaspora in very unique stories, but also very mundane stories. So I think that she's a really talented writer, and I just reread this for comfort. The next book that I read was Sally Rooney's Beautiful World, Where Are You? My first Sally Rooney novel. I gave this 4 stars. I thought Sally Rooney's writing was great. People say it's not, but I quite liked it. In Beautiful World, Where Are You? We are following 4 characters in their late 20s to mid to early 30s who are grappling with many different things: love, relationships, sex, the climate crisis, the rise of fascism. And I feel like Sally Rooney is definitely heavy-handed here in her critique of the publishing industry. Lots of critiques on class. I quite like the writing style. I love the way that like every other chapter was different emails between Alice and Eileen. I'm giving Sally Rooney her flowers because this was a good book, and I feel like she's so heavily debated in the book world, but she deserves her accolade. And lastly, The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan, which I also did not rate because I just don't really know how I feel about it. This book is following a mother who forgot her baby or her child at home and is now being sent to a re-education camp for mothers to become good. There is a lot of critiques in here of surveillance, of the Child Protective Services, of state interference with family, of motherhood, and it's a dystopic fiction. It is deeply chilling, unsettling, and uncomfortable. It made me angry at many times. I wanted to fight the system. I don't know that it was the most like, oh my god, piece of dystopic fiction I've read, but I did appreciate the critiques of motherhood and like how we really surveil mothers and how they choose to raise their children, and like there are these strict guidelines that we place upon mothers and we don't place those same guidelines upon fathers. And I think Jessamine Chan is really drawing on that critique. It says a lot about the carceral state that we currently live in. The book is just really creepy and really sad, and I just wanted to cry. I did not cry, but I wanted to. So that is my wrap up. I hope you enjoyed. I might find a new background for the next video. I might find a new format to speak about my books, but I hope you took something away from this video. Feel free to like and subscribe, and you can follow me on Goodreads.